Do you ever wonder why your team randomly throws rounds in your ranked games? We all have had an experience where the round gets off to a nice start, your team gets some picks, and it looks like a win since your team is up 5v3. And then a few shots ring off, a couple peaks happen, and the next thing you know, it's a 1v1 and your team is at a disadvantage. So why does this situation happen? And what can you do to stop it? What is going on, Pro Guides family? It is your host, Sergeant Frost, and today we are going to be talking about 5 reasons why players tend to throw rounds. While these reasons aren't necessarily always the case for you, they may show up as mistakes that you can make while playing which put you in a bad position or tendencies that other people can abuse. So buckle up and let's jump right into it. One of the classic and biggest reasons for why we see teams throw rounds in games is related to rotations. And it's a tendency that can easily throw off a round if noticed by the other team. This is an issue that mainly pertains to teams on defense, but attacking teams can do it too if they aren't communicating with what's happening on the map. The issue here we're talking about is over-rotating off of contact. I know this is more of a bad habit that the ranked environment encourages at times, but it's a risky form of rotation that can often lead to sticky situations. In higher elos, attacking teams will get smart and they will use diversions, fake smokes, and fake site takes to trigger rotations, only to have a lurker slowly walk in the opposite bomb site for free. One of the reasons why players fall for site takes and it tricks them into over-rotating is because they feel that if they wait too long, their teammates will die and retaking the site will be harder to do. A lot of players would think that this is only an issue in lower elos, but you would be surprised how many higher elo players end up falling for the same tricks as well. In fact, most of the issues we're going to cover happen at all ranks, so no matter what rank you're currently at, you can definitely become more self-aware of some bad habits you may have throughout this video. Or you can also have a coach watch your gameplay and tell you more about your weaknesses as well. On our website, ProGuides.com, we have Immortal and Radiant level coaches who are always looking to help take you to the next level. Each session is individually tailored to your needs as a player, so you'll always have exclusive lessons and tips from the top players in the game. Coaching can help anyone, so if you're trying to climb the rank ladder as quickly as possible, make sure to check us out with the link in the description. So to understand why over-rotation is an issue you need to fix, it's first a good idea to understand why this is a bad habit that happens in the first place. When you quote-unquote cheat a rotation, you technically improve the chances of making it to the site and being able to help defend it. But one thing that people don't realize is that if the enemy catches wind of this, the counter is exactly to lurk a player through mid or the other bomb site to take tons of map control for free. Cheating rotations is a high-risk, low-reward playstyle, and here's why. 1. If the enemy lurks into a deep position and calls for his team to rotate, the site take will stop and you'll be rotating into a fake site take. 2. If the enemy hears you rotating and finds a way to kill you or take valuable position on the map, he can divert a lot of attention and distract your team's communications. And lastly, if you're a site anchor on the other site, you're most likely not going to make it to help your team in time anyways, which means it's better for you to take it slow and not give away information. Due to these reasons and a couple others that are situational, it's typically not a good idea to cheat rotations just because you see 3 or 4 people on one side of the map. Or if your teammate contacts one enemy and starts screaming, "They're all coming A, they're coming A." So how do we minimize this problem? First of all, we have to realize that this is a team-related issue, so it can get out of hand if your teammates are the ones doing this. But communication always goes a long way. If your team seems to rotate too often, or if it just feels like the enemy is always on your backline, tell everyone to slow down and watch for lurks. If you find yourself over-rotating as a site anchor, perhaps it's a good idea to slow down yourself, and only limit your rotations to a midpoint on the map while preparing to retake your own site depending on the situation. Also, be sure to take your teammates' comms with a grain of salt. While I'm not saying that they're lying when they say "I think they're coming A," in ranked, everyone is a little on edge and that can lead to panic situations that the enemy can totally take advantage of. When coaching players, one of the biggest issues we see for why players throw rounds boils down to one common recurring mistake, and that's taking unnecessary duels during a round. One of my biggest pet peeves that I see a lot, particularly in solo queue more than anywhere else, is when players get aggressive and take unnecessary duels for little to no reason other than to try to start a fight. And in many cases, the reward for winning the fight is just a kill, while losing the fight means a ton of lost control as well as a man disadvantage. Keep in mind that although one of the objectives is to eliminate the enemy team, there are often more productive ways to approach this than to just peek and fight. For example, you don't want to peek an enemy alone if it's a 3v1 because your teammates can trade you if you coordinate the fight. Or you don't want to fight too much as a solo anchor because if you end up dying, your team could lose the site before they can even rotate. So one thing about this bad habit is that at its core, taking bad duels is a result of either bad game sense or overconfidence, or a lack of understanding of the stakes. Depending on the reason, there's different solutions as well, which is why this problem is such a classic issue for less experienced players. Meanwhile, for higher ranked players, overconfidence is what drives them to peak more often and results in bad situations. Regardless, figuring out which of these reasons it is key to building the discipline to prevent this from happening in the first place. If it's bad game sense, then it's a good idea to sit back and think about why you ended up in your position, and whether you actually wanted to take that duel in the first place. If it's misunderstanding the stakes, then you have to think about why you took that fight and what you would have gained assuming you won it versus what you would lose if you didn't win the duel. And if it's overconfidence, then you'll just have to learn from experience, in my opinion. In many cases, players will feel overconfident in advantageous situations and then let that complacency get them killed. If that doesn't humble you, then maybe it's time to have a coach give a second opinion on your play. Whatever the reason is, taking unnecessary duels is and will be a huge contributor to why rounds in rank will be thrown, and why highlight clips will always pop up in your YouTube feed. One habit that a lot of players develop early into the game that causes them to die is being stingy with utility to stop pushes around the map. I've seen many players die and the excuse is, well, I was saving X ability because I didn't need it. These statements are poor excuses to make, because now you've died and your team is at a disadvantage because you didn't think using your utility was worth giving you a better chance at winning the fight. This is a common issue that I've seen a lot of players make in low elo, because they see the potential benefits of the utility and hold on to it thinking that they need to use it for the perfect moment. And then the perfect moment never comes and then they end up dying before it happens anyways. A perfect example of this is Viper Mollies. Yes, it's a great post-plan tool that can secure the round, but you also have to realize it's a great tool to deny space and prevent retakes from starting in the first place. Sometimes you'll need to use it before the post-plant just so that you can get the spike down and have a post-plant in the first place. It's the same with any other utility. Don't sit on it forever only thinking about the perfect situation, but instead use it when necessary, even if it may feel scrappy. In doing so, you'll win rounds and put yourself in favorable positions much more often. All in all, this issue that players have is something that happens predominantly to low elo players because rounds are more random and players don't understand their utility as well. In higher elos, this isn't as much of an issue because players realize that at any turn, the opponent can easily kill them if they aren't careful. So if they don't use utility, they'll definitely get punished. Think of it this way, if you can beat your opponents without utility, then utility will just make it much easier to win. If you can't beat your opponents without utility, then you would have needed to use utility anyways to get in a good position, so just use your utility. Before we move on, we have to get to our question of the day. Today's question is, how is ranked treating you this act? Personally, I've been up really good in ranked. I recently got an Immortal back, and all of my goals are being met and I've been playing really well. Let us know how you guys are doing with ranked in the comment section down below. Now, let's get right back into the video. To follow up on the last issue, we're going to take a look at another common mistake that revolves around utility, and that's tunneling too hard on utility usage. This problem is an inverse of the previous problem we talked about earlier, which is being too stingy with utility usage. But it is just as real and it can affect you just as badly. For instance, Sentinel and Controller players will often be too focused on placing down their utility, adjusting it, or thinking about when to activate it on defense. This mentally takes you out of the round because you're too focused on trying to pilot a defensive setup instead of focusing on your crosshair placement to get the initial kill. Keep in mind that at the end of the day, the game is a first-person shooter. Utility is secondary to gunplay, which means that if you tunnel too hard on using utility or thinking about utility, you're missing the forest for the trees. The best way to train yourself out of this habit is to simply only use utility when you need it and do it quickly. If you hear enemies running towards your position on the map, your first reaction should be to get your gun up, position yourself well, and get your crosshair placement in a place so that you can get as many frags as possible. You shouldn't be fumbling with your utility, thinking if a slow would be good here, or if a molly would be great there. If you need to think about it, it's probably too late. Either toss it out and get your head in kill mode, or don't toss it out and get your head in kill mode anyways. Always focus on gunplay first and then abilities second, and you will realize that a lot of fights come down to who can shoot better. Utility might help, but if your utility is distracting you from getting the easy kills, then it's time to take a step back and reevaluate your game plan. For our last problem of why you throw rounds in ranked, we have a common mistake that players of all elos make that they subconsciously don't notice. One big mistake that a lot of players of all elos make in ranked is playing to take duels around the map, instead of playing for map control and to gain information. In theory, your chances of winning the round on defense are greater if you focus on keeping map control for as long as possible during the round. Stealing time off the clock from the enemy team puts pressure on them to be desperate to play the objective, which in turn will more likely force them to make a mistake as uncoordinated teams start getting antsy. Your mindset in game should always be map control first, and then taking gunfights to either prevent map control or to go take map control. This will keep your focus on taking ground from the enemy instead of just trying to eliminate them. That's also why the top fragger isn't always the best player on your team. A lurker who provides rotational information even without getting any kills is way more valuable than a guy who only gets a kill when the round is already won. A controller who denies information and puts rotational pressure on the other team through strategic smokes is much more valuable than a duelist killing a guy running out of said smoke. When you can play the game with the mindset that revolves around map control and gathering information, you'll find much more success and much more consistency in winning games than just running around trying to take duels with little purpose. And with that being said, that is all we have for the 5 reasons for why your team throws rounds in ranked. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to drop a like and subscribe to keep up to date with the latest Valorant news, updates, and guides. This has been your host Sergeant Frost, and good luck on the grind this act.